Okay, so here is, get rid of that right now. Okay, so here is a little system diagram that I made, I think. No, it's not in there. Look, it happened to me too. All right, I will get it from over here. We'll use this. Okay, so here you go. Now, what if I want to actually plot this thing? So we use the term plotting to describe what you probably would call printing. And the reason is that back in the olden times when AutoCAD was just beginning, there was no such thing as a printer that could print on that big of a piece of paper, right? And so we created these things called plotters. And what the plotter was is it was a little robotic arm that would literally hold a pen, like an actual pen. And it would then just draw your CAD file onto a piece of paper for you. So it's one of those things where the robotic arm would be able to like drag it back and forth like this, and then there was like a spooler thing that would move the paper underneath of it to be able to go up and down. So the paper is constantly moving, and the pen's moving back and forth, and it would be able to draw everything. So, and that was called plotting it for some reason. Those were called plotters. And the really cool plotters had like more than one pen in it. So you could have, you could do different colors of pens and have that instruction in there. Or sometimes like the thickness of the pen would change. And so the robotic arm could like go and like put that pen down and pick up another pen and come back and, right? So that was the basic, that was the process of doing it, which meant that AutoCAD had to sort of figure out its own fonts that could be drawn using a pen. So that's why when you go into Textiles, there were those two different kinds of fonts. There were the true type fonts, and then the STX ones or whatever they were. Those are the ones that AutoCAD had to invent that could be drawn with a pen, because that's how the plotters worked. They also, whoops, what was that? That was my microphone transmitter. They also had to invent their own sort of drivers to talk to. You know what a driver is? A driver is like a little piece of software that gets installed on the computer that tells the operating system how to talk to a piece of hardware that's plugged into the computer. And so AutoCAD had to kind of create its own little kind of driver thing to talk to these plotters, okay? Because that was not something that like the operating system naturally knew how to do. And so they're called PC3 files, and PC3 files are plotter definition files that tells AutoCAD how to talk to these pen plotters, okay? And so most of the terminology and the process you have to go through to actually plot or print things in AutoCAD still kind of survives from those old pen plotter days. And so there's some things you're going to say like, why is this so complicated? And it's because the way they figured it out first was they were subject to these limitations of these pen plotters, okay? So I'm going to explain to you how this works and show it to you, and you're going to be like, why? This is way harder than it has to be. And that's why. But there's another reason why it's kind of harder than it seems like it has to be, and that is because of scale. And scale, while not super important to most of the things that we do in sound, scale is critically important to almost everybody else. And so the ability to sort of like be able to make this drawing show up on a piece of paper and have all of the lines on that be the right distance apart so that you can actually put a real scale ruler on that and measure what it actually is going to be in real life, like, is critically important. If that doesn't work, then the drawing is useless. Like, you can't build anything from it. You know, those of you that have been working in the scene shop maybe have experienced that. You know, where you've got this thing on a piece of paper, and you have to like put a scale ruler on this, say, how big is this thing I have to cut, right? And if you cut it even a little bit too short or leave it too long, like, it doesn't work. You know, the difference of like this much is the difference between it being able to be used or not being able to be used, right? And hopefully you cut it too long, not too short, because you can't. You can fix it if it's too long. You can't fix it if it's too short. You got to start over. So that's like that. Those, when you draw those lines on that piece of paper coming out of that plotter, they have to be exactly the right distance apart, or that drawing is useless. And so that notion of scale is critical, and that's part of the reason why this is more complicated than it seems like it has to be. I'm not going to teach you how to plot in scale today. If that's something that's really important for you to learn how to do, we can talk about it later, or maybe you can go take one of the technical graphics classes with the TDs or something to really learn that. It's not something I'm going to teach you because it's not something that's super important to the stuff we do. So I'm going to skip over that part of this process. But just know that some of the things that you have to do when you're setting up these plots, those steps exist because that is the step where you would have to figure out the scale. Okay, and we're just going to like ignore that, but you still have to do that step. We're just not going to care about the result of that step. Okay, does that kind of sort of make sense? Okay, so here you go. Maybe, well, probably so far in your life when you have ever printed things, you've just been in whatever program you're using and you just go to the file menu and you say print, right? Maybe that's the scenario that you've done. And AutoCAD has that, but here's what happens when you do that. This is what will show up, which is not your whole drawing. It's like part of the drawing, and then there's this other part that's getting cut off. It's basically, I don't know what it's doing. Like it's weird, right? So this doesn't work, obviously. So we have to do something more. So over here in the bottom of the screen, maybe you've started to notice these little things. So let me actually I'm just going to make a new drawing. And when you make a drawing, you get two of them. They're called layouts, okay? And you get two by default, layout 1, layout 2. And what happens with these layouts is that this is where you kind of lay out how you're going to plot this thing out, okay? So let's say, so here's my layout 1. Actually, I'm going to make a new default layout, okay? So here's the default layout. This is what happens. So when you make a layout, boom, you get like a fake piece of paper, and you get a default what's called viewport, okay? And what a viewport is it's a little window that you get to use to look at your drawing, okay? Because we are now in what's called paper space. So in AutoCAD, you have model space or you have paper space. Model space is where you draw things. Paper space is where you lay things out to be plotted, okay? And so we are in paper space right now, which means anything I draw right now will not show up over here in my drawing, okay? Like I could draw a line here. Like let me do this. I'll draw a line that like goes across my thing there, right? So, right, that goes over there. But if I go into model space, that line is not there. See? Because I've drawn it in paper space, not model space. So what a viewport does is it allows you to look into model space from paper space. So let's look at this default viewport. If you double-click inside of this viewport box, now you get to manipulate model space from paper space. Why do you need to do that? Not to draw. You should not be drawing through this viewport because that is not a good idea. But what you can do is you can decide what it is you want to have show up inside of this little window. So this is where you could say, I'm going to do a zoom, and then I'm going to drag a little selection window around the section view, okay? And it's going to say, oh, okay, here's how I could fit that into this size of box, okay? And then you could, you have two options here. You either double-click on the outside of the viewport in Paperspace, and now you're back in Paperspace again. So now this viewport is one thing, and you could actually move it around like it's one thing, right? And it just moves the window. But it doesn't move what the window looks at. It just moves the window itself, okay? And maybe you're thinking, well, if I'm printing the section, I don't want to have part of the ground plan like showing there. So this is where you could adjust the size of your viewport, right? You could say, okay, so maybe this viewport, maybe this viewport wants to be a little bit smaller, okay? There. And now I can move it. Now the other thing I could do is, well, actually, I'm not going to tell you that. So there you go. Now that I've got that, I could then take this and just sort of put it wherever I want it on the page. And now I could right-click on this layout, and I could say Edit Page Setup. And what this does is you kind of say, OK, what printer am I going to be using here? And you have some options. First of all, it'll show you whatever printers you already have defined on your computer, printers that like your Mac operating system knows how to talk to. But it'll also have a bunch of these PC3 files. You remember what PC3 files are? Yeah, so this is the sort of like plotter definition files. So AutoCAD has some default plotter files, and they're for making PDF files, which is super helpful. Although it's not perfect, as you'll discover. But if I select like Clarence, which is the printer we have here in the lab, watch what happens. So okay, look at the paper space. Pay special attention to the little dotted line that goes around the edge of the virtual piece of paper. You watching? You looking? You seeing? Everybody looking? I'm not going to do this, and then 30 seconds later, somebody's going to say, wait, what happened? How did you do that? No? OK.
Now we're all going to be like that.
We're ready? OK. So watch. I'm going to select Clarence.
Wait, what happened?
And did you see what happened? Did you see it? The little lines moved a little bit, OK? Ever so slightly, yes.
So when I do the edit page setup thing,
yeah.
my little screen here, it's black. Like it's not showing that. It's just black.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes. This is a bug. I know about this. Update AutoCAD.
I tried to change the viewpoint and it crashed, and I had to start all the way over.
What operating system are you using?
I have absolutely no idea. I'm so sorry.
Go to your Apple menu up there. Not Apple menu. Go to About This Mac.
Catalina.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe try running an update. An AutoCAD update, maybe. OK, but in all honesty, that window doesn't matter. OK? It doesn't matter. The part that I'm wanting you to look at is this paper space area. So what happened was these dotted lines moved a little bit. And this has to do with what's called the printable area of the page, OK? Because there is no printer that can print all the way to the edge of the piece of paper, right? It's just not possible. The way the mechanics of the mechanism work, they just can't do it. They can't put ink all the way to the edge of the page. There has to be room for the screws and bolts that hold the thing that makes the ink go on the page, and that has to go somewhere, which means you can't go all the way to the page. And you're thinking, wait a minute, Jason, I have seen all kinds of things where ink goes all the way to the edge of the page. Like Bella's got a little paperback book there where the ink is going all the way to the page of the cover, edge of the page of the cover. How is that possible? You just said that's not possible.
They cut it backwards.
Exactly. So what actually happens is they print it on a bigger piece of paper, and then they cut it to make it look like they got all the way to the edge. Okay. It's an old printing trick. So I just wanted to make sure you see that selecting that printer in your page setup for the layout is a really important step, because that tells you where the printable edge is. And if you put something outside of that edge, it is not going to show up even in the PDF file.
So that's simply just checking what printer you're going to use, going to send it to?
So yeah, if I'm going to print on that printer, I really want to make sure I have that printer selected in the page setup for that layout before I start laying this out here, so that I don't do a whole bunch of work like making this look really pretty, and then I select the printer, and then suddenly I realize that the margins have screwed up all my work, and I have to start over. So I don't really want to do that. But even when you're doing like PDFs and stuff, that matters. So if you're going to do like that AutoCAD to PDF thing, that has printable area restrictions as well. So you have to think about that. OK. So let me show you another little trick here. You can actually delete this viewport. You can select it like any other thing and just hit erase, and it goes away. And to make another one, you just type Vport or Vports, and it brings up this window. And you just decide what you want to do. It's like, all right, I want a new single viewport. And it's going to say, all right, where do you specify the first corner? Where do you want it? So maybe I just want a viewport that I know will fill the entire printable area. So I can just go in here, and I can click down here, right, just, really close to the edge of that printable area. I don't want to go all the way on it, but just a little bit off from it. OK? And then I can go up here and specify the opposite corner that is similarly close. OK? There you go. And now I can go in, double-click, go into model space, zoom into the part that I want, which would be that. Oops. Not that. Oh, my little origin's in the way. OK. So this is one of those like weird steps. It's like, why do I have to do this? Why can't it just know what I want to print? It's like, all right. So there it is. Now, before I do anything else, maybe here's the classic mistake that everybody makes, is that, OK, I got it. It's in there. And now I want to go in and zoom in here. Oh, no. Like, I want to bring this paper space up. Well, guess what? You were still in model space. Even though you took your cursor outside of the viewport, your mouse was still controlling model space. OK? So don't do that. You'll make that mistake, I guarantee, but I'm trying to, like, maybe. You'll make the mistake. I just want you to know what happened. What happened was you were still in model space. So you've got to, like, go back and do this again. So all right, so that's it. So now you got to go back to model space, which you can do by either going outside of the viewport and double-clicking, or you see when you went into model space, this new little button showed up down here. See that? See that little button? That toggles you between model space and paper space. It takes you back to paper space. Okay? And now when you're in paper space, now you can zoom like this, right, and get your paper to fill your screen. Everybody with me so far?
Is there
Okay.
a shortcut for that? Toggling between model space and paper space?
Probably, but I don't know what it is. It's tricky because, when you're in model space, you're in drafting mode. So like, all the things are part of it, right? So it's really weird. Basically, like AutoCAD doesn't know that you're not in paper space anymore for the purposes of like the way your mouse and keyboard function. Okay. So yeah, there might be. I don't know what it is though. Okay, so maybe this is beautiful. This is what I want. It's perfect. I'm ready to go now. I just hit right-click on this, and now I hit print, and it brings this up, and it's telling me, okay, I'm using layout 2 for this, It's going to go to the printer clearance, so on and so forth. There is a scale thing here, which you're not going to worry about right now. And you're going to hit plot. And if, now I'm doing clearance just because I want you to see an actual piece of paper come out with the thing on it. You have a what? So yeah, you're not connected to a printer right now, and so it's just telling you that. It's like nothing's going to happen if you try to do this right now. So if you want to use clearance, for example, you have to actually plug in to one of our docking stations here because it's a network printer, but it's not on Wi-Fi. It's only on the wired network. So you have to plug in, and then you'll see it. And you guys are welcome to use this printer for your classwork and stuff, for your sound classwork. Like I don't want you like printing out your English papers on this thing, or your credit card bill or whatever. Like that's actually. I mean, it cost me like $1,200 to replace the toner in that. Okay, so we don't want to be using that unnecessarily. Okay, but you're welcome to use it for your things you do for sound stuff. Okay, so here is what came out of the printer. So the good news is, you see how it went all the way to the edge, right? Well, as close to the edge as possible, right? It's filling the whole page. That's nice. Super great. Not a whole lot of wasted space involved here. But it added something. It added words where there weren't words. What's going on there? Well, you know how you didn't have to pay anything for AutoCAD? If you had read the fine print about that, they would have said, like, we will give this to you for free, but anything that you try to print is going to get watermarked. So that's what happens, is they put this little watermark on the edge that said, hey, this was made by a student-free version of AutoCAD. Which, how big of a deal is that? Is not a huge enough deal to make me want to spend a couple $1,000s to actually buy AutoCAD. But it sure would be cool if I didn't have to have that. And there are some strategies for dealing with that I will show you another time. But just know that that's what happens when you're using the free version. You do get that. So you have to think about that because remember, the printable area was all the way where that edge of that viewport was. That's where I drew it. But because I know that AutoCAD is going to put that text there, I should really probably draw my viewport a little tighter in so that that watermark doesn't end up going on top of something that's part of my drawing. Okay? So you're going to want to give yourself a little bit more space than the printable area indicates, because AutoCAD will put that right on the edge of the printable area, okay, when you're using the free version, okay? Make sense?
Eventually buy it.
Well, so eventually this free version will not work, right, when they realize you're not a student anymore, okay? I think the code works for like a year, and then they're going to make you like reprove that you're a student. Yeah. So eventually they're going to say, hey, wait, like you're not a student anymore. And at that point, I would honestly recommend two things. One is that you go to a subscription-based model. Like, don't buy the full license; it's too expensive. But go to a subscription. In a subscription-based model is like you just pay a little bit of money every year, and you get to use it for a year. Okay. But I would also suggest that when you go to that, like, do the AutoCAD LT, not the full AutoCAD. The difference between AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT is that Z-axis. So in AutoCAD LT, you can't do 3D drawings. But other than that, it's the same. Yeah. And we tend to not really do a whole lot of 3D drawings. So there might be a few scenarios, a few roads you might travel professionally where you might end up wanting to draw in 3D. And when that happens, it's going to be because you're working for a company that wants to do that, and they are going to buy the license for you. But if you're just working on your own and you want to be able to use AutoCAD because you got some gigs, do the subscription. The LT is subscription. It's really not that bad. You can totally pay for it with whatever you're making money doing the job for, and then you write it off on your taxes as a business expense. Okay? And it doesn't count towards your taxable income, which is Not the same thing as getting it for free, but it does mean that, so the deal with the taxes is that a lot of your income is probably going to be self-employment income when you go out there in the big wide world, because ours is kind of a gig economy kind of thing, which means that you're going to have to, in a lot of cases, you're going to be responsible for your own like health insurance and stuff like that. But it also means that you get taxed differently. Okay, so you have to be responsible for paying the taxes. You don't have anybody taking money out of your check, right, to pay the taxes. They're just going to pay you what they said they'd pay you. You have to be responsible for figuring out what you owe Uncle Sam. Okay. Well, we could teach a whole class on that, but the main thing is that you are going to lose that money no matter what. Like whatever that amount of money is that you owe Uncle Sam, you're going to have to give it up one way or the other. So there's no point in trying to fight that part of it. Like you're not going to be able to you're going to lose that money. You get to decide, you have a little bit of control over what you lose it on though. So if you decide, for example, that I need AutoCAD in order to do the work that is earning this income for me, then guess what? That is part of the cost of doing this business that you're trying to do, which means, let's say you have to spend $100. I don't know what the subscription costs these days. Let's say it's $100 a year for AutoCAD LT. You got to pay $100. You have to pay that $100 in order to do the job that lets you earn $1,000. Okay? So guess what? Guess how much money you actually made in that scenario? $900, right? Because it cost you $100 of the $1,000 to do the job in the first place. Well, if you tell Uncle Sam that, and you say, yeah, I made $1,000, but I had to spend $100 just to make that $1,000, then they'll say, okay, we're only going to tax you on the $900 then. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you pay $100 less in taxes, but it means that your taxes are calculated from an income number that is $100 cheaper. And so you pay a little bit less taxes. It's not a one-to-one trade-off. It's not like you pay $100 less taxes because you spend $100 to do the job. But again, you're going to lose the money anyway. So you may as well spend. I just have learned the hard way to every time I make any little self-employment income, I spend some of that money on something related to doing the work. And then I keep the receipts of that or the documentation so that when I do have to do taxes at the end of the year, I can put together a whole list of things that I had to spend money on to do the job, and then that reduces my overall taxable income. My tax bill is not as big at the end of the year, and I don't feel quite as bad. Again, I'm giving up the money either way. That's going to happen. I'd rather give it up on buying gear and gadgets and stuff than throw it away into the system, right, so to speak, right? Some of it's going to, there's no way that some of it doesn't go into the system, but you can hang on to some of it, okay? So that's a long answer for how you if you're going to have to pay for AutoCAD. You will, but there are ways to soften the blow. Okay, but yeah, maybe we should do a little thing about
We should, and it should take care of our math dealing.
your tax. Well, maybe not that, but we could talk about taxes, yeah. All right, so there you go. That's the basic idea of how to plot in AutoCAD. Now you're saying, well, gee, Jason, like, do I really have to put everything on a piece of paper? That seems like that's so, 20 years ago, and
We weren't July.
and and I'm saying, yeah, I totally, like, I don't really do paper anymore either. So here's your other options. So you go back to your page setup here, and for this layout, and instead of Clarence, you could say one of these AutoCAD PDF things, right? And oh, look, my printable area changed. Awesome. This particular file does not have, because there's no actual printer involved, it doesn't have any margins. It will actually make a PDF that goes all the way in, which is fine if this is only ever going to be looked at on a screen. But every once in a while, maybe you're going to want this to go onto a piece of paper. And it'd be nice if you could account for that now. So there's a couple different options here. You can do the DWG to PDF, which is kind of the same thing, but you can also select this paper size. So that full bleed, it's like you only get that for that PDF thing, but full bleed means all the way to the edge. So you could instead go find one that is not full bleed. So you could do, let's see, let's find one here. ANSI A, 8.5 by 11. There we go. All right, there, now see, now I've got really big margins. And I'm going to have to shrink this viewport down. And then maybe go into model space and tweak, what shows up. Okay, now when I go to plot or print, comes up here, it's doing the AutoCAD PDF, and you hit plot, and watch what happens. It says, oh, guess what? Your plotter is actually a file save dialog. So you just say where you want to put this. So I'll say here on my desktop, and it went through the whole thing. It says, okay, it's done. You can go get it now. And I think that's it. Yep, that's it. So here it is, coming up in Acrobat. Ta-da! With the watermark. Right. So it is possible if you have the full version of Acrobat, you might be able to find a way to undo that, which I will show you some other time. But notice what happened though. Remember what I said about the printable area? Because I had this viewport all the way to the edge, guess what? The watermark went over my drawing. So you really probably want to bring this in a little bit to make room for that, because you can't avoid that ending up on your drawing. You might be able to figure out a way to get rid of it after the fact, but it's going to be there at some point. So you just have to keep that in mind, how that works. That make sense? OK. So a couple other things. If we go to our page setup again, see this plot style? Plot style is sort of like text styles and point styles and dimension styles. This is like where you save settings for like how things are going to plot. Well, if you pop up that menu, you have some options here. One of them is monochrome. And what monochrome means is like it's just going to ignore color. Okay, so this is where like you could have yellow text in your model, but then when you plot it, it's going to plot black. Okay, so that's a really quick shortcut for avoiding poor color choices. Okay, but this means all the colors go away, including maybe some of the ones that you would like to have show up. That's the downside. But you could do that. That's a nice little shortcut. But the other way, like let's say, okay, here's something. Like, see that little pink thing? Like, let's say that was some text that I didn't make the right color. I don't want it to be that. What you have to do is you have to go into your layers here, and you have to set all your layers to be white.
You want them to be white and not black?
Well, white plots as black.
Oh, because your model space is black.
Yeah.
Got it.
And that particular little thing looks like it might actually have a color defined that, oh yeah, see? So it actually has a color defined instead of by layer. So I'll switch it to by layer. It's got an arrowhead too. By layer. Yeah. Okay, so now what'll happen is because I changed all that, now when I plot, everything will be black because everything on the layer, it's on white layers. And the stuff that is defined color, because I actually made it that color, either on the layer or in the actual thing, right? I've done it on the actual thing. But you could leave some of your layers color and just make all the other ones white. And then when you plot it, you'll get only the things in color that you want to have color, and the things that you don't want to have in color will plot not in color. That make sense? All right. So that's one way of dealing with that. Okay, now what I want to show you is something really snazzy, okay? Which is now you got the basic mechanics of like how to print and plot and make PDFs and all of that. But how do you actually make these things look cool and look professional? Yeah, so maybe you've seen draftings that have these things called title blocks, for example. And what is a title block? Well, it's just some boxes that have descriptions like, what the heck am I looking at here, right? Because it's not always clear what you're looking at here. And you maybe have seen that in some of the paperwork looks when I've come like, what am I looking at here? Like, what is this thing? What's the information that you're trying to convey here? And sometimes if that's in your title block, then that's really helpful. I can look at that and say, oh, I'm supposed to be looking at, the balcony aim points or something like that. Like, great, now I know what I'm looking for. I will look for that. But also, like, sometimes these files get passed around, and maybe you want to make sure that people know what this is attached to, like what show is this, who did this, where did this come from. Maybe you have, this happens to me a lot. People will send me things that I've given them. I'll say, hey, this is something you gave me a long time ago. Can you tweak it and send it back to me? And what they're sending me is like the PDF. And I don't remember where that came from. But the title block might give me some clues, right? One of the things I like to put in my title blocks is the name of the AutoCAD file that came from, right? The actual file name. I try to put that in my title blocks because then when I get a PDF back from somebody with some suggestions or something, and maybe there's been some time and I don't remember where that came from, I can look at that file name and I can do a search on my computer for that actual file name, .dwg, and I will find that file and then I can edit it, right? So having that kind of information in model space is not super helpful because it just gets in the way when you're drawing. But you can put that in paper space and it'll only show up when you plot, but it won't show up in your drawing, right, in model space. Does that make sense? So this is where drawing in model space can be helpful. Now, you could just do that. You could just start drawing in model space, right? So you could just say, all right, I'm going to make myself a little title block, right? And I'm going to put a little line here and some text here. And all that kind of stuff, right? You could actually do that. You could just draw all that information in paper space and it would plot, and then you could do your viewports and all that. But that's a lot of work to do over and over and over again every time you plot something, right? That'd be kind of a pain in the butt. So let me show you a better way. Are you ready? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here, and I am going to go back to Clarence, and I'm going to do a tabloid size piece of paper. That's 11 by 17. Most of our drawings fit pretty comfortably on 11 by 17 size of paper. Every once in a while we need to go a little bit bigger if it's a really detailed drawing. But that's why we have this printer is an 11 by 17 printer, which that's why it's kind of expensive because it has to be bigger to hold a bigger piece of paper. So I'm going to switch that first. And there's that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Insert, Block. And I'm going to hit Browse here. And I'm going to get a block. What is a block, Jason? You might be thinking. A block is just an AutoCAD drawing, right? It's just a DWG file. But when you insert it as a block, it comes in as one object. That really detailed drawing that is an AutoCAD file, you get to put it into another AutoCAD file as one thing, okay? Which is helpful because you could like draw something once, something you know you're going to use a lot, like a title block, for example, or maybe a set of symbols, like loudspeaker symbols, or other different things. You can draw them once, and then you insert them as blocks, and then they're like one little thing, and you move them around. But you can also give blocks properties and dynamic properties that you can say, hey, when I insert this, there might be things I want to change about it as I insert it, and there will be ways that you can do that. And I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to get my block. So here's my block. I've called it Border Tabloid New. New because I have literally used the same title block for 20 years. I drew it once 20 years ago and I never changed it until last year when I started teaching this class. And I was like, oh, I should teach them how to make title blocks. And I went and pulled out my title block and realized, oh, I really haven't done anything with this for 20 years. Maybe I should tweak it for purposes. So new means the new and improved version. But I survived for 20 years without ever having to change it, which is like, that's the way to go. Like, do it right the first time, and then you never have to do it again. So I select it. Look, it's just a DWG file. You see that? It's nothing special. It's just a file. I hit open. And now it's there. And I say insert. And it asks me specify insertion point. And the insertion point, depends on where you're going to put it. But I'm going to set it right here. And look what it says. It's now asking me for information. Like the draw, what is the, oh, that's getting truncated a little bit. It's supposed to say, what is the drawing number? So I'm going to say this is drawing 1 out of how many? How many drawings are there? This is ultimately going to become in a package of paperwork. And a lot of times you want to do this like 1 of 20 or something so that people know whether they've got them all or not. Because maybe it got passed around and maybe there's information they think is missing and they could look at that and realize, oh, there's supposed to be 20 sheets. I've only got 19. So I'll just say 1 out of 10. What is the drawing title? What is this? This is going to be my loudspeaker ground plan. What's the name of the show? I think this one was A Little Night Music. I'm going to keep it all in caps. Who drafted this thing? Me. What's the theater? Stevens Center. Who's the designer? Me. What's the scale? Well, no scale is the default for me because I don't care about that. But if there was a scale, you could put that in there. And next means I've got more things. Date, file name, school. So I've got fields to have the file name and the date that this thing was plotted. Because sometimes you might make more than one version of this, as you might tweak things or something, and you might have a few versions floating around there, and it'd be nice to tell everybody, it's like, make sure you're looking at the version from March 4th, because that's the right one. And if that's in the title block, then that's easy to find. OK, so I hit confirm, and look, all that information is now in there. And this is all one object now that I can move around and play around with. You see that? That makes sense? I made this version without an actual box around it, just so that I could easily manipulate the rest of it later. But because as paper space changes and stuff like that, I could do that. But I've got another version that has a border on it. But what you could do now is I could just say, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to do that. OK? Now I've got it. And now I can put a viewport in here and just attach that viewport to this area there. And now I can zoom in. Now it's super pretty. See that? That makes sense? Yeah? Now I plot this, and it looks nice and professional, and everything's good. Now, what if I want to change any of this? Well, I can just double-click on here, on the title block, and here's all the different fields that are in. So I can just go in and edit each of these values. So if it's like, oh, wait, I had someone else draft this. So I had Kelsey Grigg draft this for me. Then fine, it updates it. It's there. OK? Isn't that slick? You want to know how to do that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to have a new drawing. You're going to go in here to model space, and you're just going to draw your title block. OK? So first thing I would want to do is decide what size of paper is this title block going to be for, because you're going to have to make one for every size of paper, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to try to stretch them later. So For the assignment, I'm going to have you make 3 different ones. I'm going to have you make an 8.5 by 11 one, an 11 by 17 one, and a 24 by 36 one. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to just create a rectangle. Now, it's very important that you start this at 0, 0. Okay? Because that becomes the insertion point when you insert it as a block. Okay? So we're going to start at 0, 0. And then the other corner is, this is like the size of the piece of paper minus the margin.
Oh, God.
Okay? So if this is going to be for an 11 by 17 piece of paper, how much margin should I allow for in order to make sure that I'm always in the printable area? I would say at least a ½ inch, but maybe even more. But let's just say ½ inch. So what size would this be in order to allow me to have a ½ inch on every side of the page for an 11 by 17 sheet?
10.5, 16.5.
There you go. Okay. So it actually would be 16.5 on the x, comma 10.5. Was that right? No. Because you need it on each side, right? So you're going to take a total of an inch off of this thing. Okay? So we're actually going to be 16, comma 10. Okay? There you go. So this is just a reference for you. So you're like, okay, this is the size of box that I'm trying to do this thing in. Generally speaking, for most of the stuff that we do, the title blocks that kind of go along the right side of the page like that tend to work better for us than the little ones in the bottom right corner. That just takes up some usable space for us that we usually want to have the drawing into. So just generally, I would say I would go for a short one that is, or a squished one that's long that you go on the side rather than a big block on the bottom right. For the kind of stuff we do, just seems to work better. Okay, so you're just going to draw it, right? I'm just going to go in here and say, okay, it'll be that big. And you just start drawing the lines, just like you would if you were drawing anything, right? Put one here. You have to start thinking about, how many different things you want to have in here. But you have to make a little box for every little piece of text that you want to have in your title block. Okay? Now, how do you do that really cool dynamic text, right, that lets you ask the question? Well, it's not text, actually. It's called an attribute. Okay? So you're going to type the word attribute, A-T-T, and you get attradef. And actually, sorry. Yeah, no, that's right. I think that's right. Maybe not.
Go to your over that one. Right click on it. And then see how you don't have like midpoint or any of the other ones on.
Hang on, I think that command changed. Let me see if I can find it in here. It's wanting to do like a block. That is. Well, that's what I thought I did. And that's doing that attribute definition. I think ATT dialog, I think is what I want. Let's try that. No? Yeah. ATT?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Weird. Oh, that's weird. Okay, well, there you go. All right, so here you go. So the tag, this is, no one will ever see this this text but you. So this is like, what do you call this so that you know what it is, right? So maybe this is drawing title, okay? You can't have any spaces in this. So this has to be whatever you do it, no spaces, okay? The prompt is the question that you want to have attached to in that window. So as we've seen, don't put too long of a question or it gets cut off. So I'm just going to say title question mark or whatever you want to do, right? And then default is like if you don't type anything, what will automatically be there, okay? And I would suggest if it's something that you want to make sure gets changed, then make the default something that will stand out to you if you forget to do it. Yeah, exactly, right? Something, you know. Yeah, I mean, I can just do like, you know, title. Something that will look out of place if you forgot to do it, okay? All right, and then you can do text styles, and all the same things apply to text here. This is where you can do justification and the text style and the size and all that stuff that we've learned already. And so I hit save, and it says, okay, where do you want to put it? I'm just going to set it here for now, and now I can rotate this. So I'll rotate it, and I'm going to put it that way, and
We can change these after.
yeah. So I'm going to put it in there. And of course, you can adjust now the size, you know, to height to make it fit in there. So maybe I want this a little bit bigger. You know, all that same stuff you've learned about text still works here, okay? Here's one thing that you may want to sort of think about. Oops, hang on. Is
So for the textile, should we have standard and?
well, you should make your own, right? I'm just using the standard for now, but all the same things we've learned before about textiles apply here. So what I'm wanting to do is I want to see if it'll show me the justification settings, which it's not showing me.
No, I think you have to set them beforehand.
No, you should be able to. We used to be able to change them, like literally in the last 9 months.
How big should we make it?
Well, this is the problem, is that when you have a variable field like this, you never want it to go outside of the box that you've defined. And so there is for these attribute definitions, there is a way that you can justify the text to be what's called a fit. So let's try this again and see if I can get it. Yeah, you see this one that says fit? Generally, I would want to do that for anything that is going to change. If it's something that's like there's going to be default, or it's just a name or something that's never going to change, then I would just do that as a regular single line text and you do it. But fit means that it will stretch it or adjust it to make sure it always is inside that box, which sometimes means it's going to end up looking weird. But I'd rather have it look a little weird than go outside the box. It's like the lesser of two evils kind of thing. So maybe this could be scale, for example. Actually, I'll do show. Show title. And B. And I would, again, highly recommend fit. And then we can put that in here. Oops, rotated that weird. Okay. So now if I rotate it, watch what happens when I put it in somewhere. So I'm going to take this and move it into here. And now I'm going to take the size of it and say, okay, it's going to go all the way to there. And that looks weird right now because it just says the word show in it. But when I edit that, attribute when I put this in there, like let me, it won't do it right now because it's an attribute. When I actually insert it as a block, then it'll write that default text and it'll fill all the way to that edge with the larger thing. Okay. But right in this view, it only shows you the tag. Okay. So you're going to make all of these. Now there's a couple of special ones that you're going to want to do, like that file name and that date thing. That's something that you're not going to want to be changing when you insert it. You want the computer to change that for you automatically. So how do you do that? Well, let me show you a cool little thing. So you go to Insert Field. And a field is a little piece of data that exists somewhere. So here, let's look at date and time. You can do creation date, today's date, plot date, or save date. I'm going to do plot date because this is going to be part of my title block that'll be when I plot stuff. So I just mean whenever I hit that plot button, I want it to write the date that happened in. You could even have it do the time, but let's just do date for now. This was insert field. Okay, and now look what happened. It gives me this thing called a field expression. And you can format the date here. You could say, how do I want it to look? Do I want it to be like this, or do you want to do like all the way out, or maybe, date and time? You decide what you want that. I'm just going to do this. And then you see this little field expression thing? That is very important text. You're going to select that and copy that. And now you can cancel out here. And now you can do another attribute. And this will be date, prompt, plot date. Default value is now going to be that expression. Okay? And I put that in there. It says, where do you want to put it? And I put it right there. And then what will happen is, when I insert that and plot it, it will pull that information in and replace that text.
If you
Okay?
save this drawing on your desktop and then insert this drawing onto one of your layouts as a block, would we see what?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second here. Yeah. So there's another field that I'm doing this quick and dirty right now. I'm not going to make it pretty. Let's do another field, and you can do the file name, right? So if you go to Document, I think it is, there's file name. Okay, and there's the field expression for file name. So I want that. I'm going to cancel, and now I'm going to do another attribute. File name, question mark. Default value is that. Now this one I definitely want to do fit justification for, because who knows how long the file name will be. I definitely want to make sure it fits. Yes?
There's an option for title. Should we use that for the drawing title?
Title is like a property that you can define for the AutoCAD file. So that only works if you go in and put that data in every document, and you're probably not going to do that. So I would say no. All right, so I'll put this in. All right, so now let me save this, and you can see what happens. Border demo. Okay, so I'll go back to this other file. I'm going to make myself a new layout. Let me get rid of this, and let's try to insert this as a block now and see what happens. Hopefully I did it right. Let's see. There it is. Open, insert. It says, where do you want to put it? And I'm going to put it there, and then I forgot to change my paper size. That's why it's so big. But see, now it's asking me for, okay, what is the title? And I will say Grimm's Fairy Tales, because that's what I'm working on right now. Well, I just finished. I've got another. This is another. Oh, that should have been show title there. And then this should be system diagram. And see how it's defaulted in to the plot date and the file name? And notice how it's doing the full path. Probably don't want that, actually. So let me show you how to change that. So if you go into Field and you look for the file name, you can change this display to just file name only. And that changes this field expression. So now I'll go in and I can change. I should be able to change that to this now. There you go.
Will that change it in your other drawing?
No.
As referencing?
No.
Because you insert it as a block,
Yeah.
so it's separate.
Yeah. So, sorry, yeah?
What is the display file extension name again?
That would mean, like, do you want to have the .dwg on it or not? Okay. Yeah. So this is actually a good question, though, Lance, because once you insert it as a block, then that information is now in your file, which is great because now you can reuse it as many times as you want without necessarily having the original file on your computer. That's the good news. Bad news is if there's something wrong with it, then you have to delete the block from the file and then import a revised one in. So you definitely want to make sure you get this right. But if you really wanted to be super slick and clever, then what you would do is once you get these title blocks figured out and you know they're the right size, you got all the right attributes defined, everything's good, it looks good, it works, then I would go back to your DWT template files, open them directly as DWTs, not as like the new file version of that, and insert that block. You could just go into, create yourself 3 new layouts in your template, insert those blocks into your template, and then they're in there. And then every time you create a new file from your template, the blocks come with it. And now you're not having to go find that border every single time. It's already in the file. And so then when you go in to insert, so for example, here I am, I can make a new layout now, and I can just say insert block, and it's already in the list, right? Because it's already there. I don't have to go find it on the computer. I just can make another one and put it in, okay? So I would highly recommend that eventually, when you get this thing done, is put it in as a block into your template, okay? So let me show you, let's talk through really quick what I'm going to ask you to do. Because you're going to have a couple weeks on this because we got spring break. So I'm going to ask you, if you go on Canvas, you should see this now. I want you to create some dynamic title blocks and use them to plot some of the things you've done already. So I want you to plot your system diagram, your annotated system diagram that you did from two assignments ago or whatever it was, and then also your loudspeaker plots that you did for this week. And so I want you to create 3 different title blocks. One that would fit on an 8.5 by 11, one that would fit on 11 by 17, and one that would fit on a 24 by 36. Okay, and you're going to submit those to me.
By 36?
24 by does it say 26?
It does.
Oh,
Is it supposed to be 36?
it's supposed to be. It says 36 up here. For some reason, I screwed up. 36. 36. 24 by 26 is not an actual page size. You won't find that. Definitely 36. Sorry about that. My mistake. So this title block should have these things in it. So these are the different bits of information you need to make sure you put on it. And you can put other things if you want, and make sure that the appropriate things are auto-updating fields that prompt you. So you're going to turn in 5 files. I want you to turn in a new copy of your drawing template, your DWT, that has those 3 title blocks in it already, right? So I'm going to be able to create a new file from your DWT and be able to have those blocks already. Okay, so new DWT file. I want you to turn in the 3 DWG files of those blocks, turn those in as separate files so I can look at them and interrogate them. And then a single PDF file that has the plots for those drawings, right? The system diagram and the 3 different views from your loudspeaker drawing, okay? Now, do you know how to combine multiple PDFs into one file? Okay, so let me show you how to do that. So here you are in Acrobat, and what I would do is like, okay, so here's that a little night music section file. There's a few ways to do this. You can do create, and you can combine files into a single PDF, and then you just go and you can just go and find all the different PDF files you need, and put them in there, and it'll make one PDF file. That's the easiest way to do it, which I would recommend that that's how you do it. So I can just show you, like I'll get this, and this, and this, and this. These are just the syllabus files. Something. We'll add that in, and they're all in there now. And then you hit combine, and now it's all one thing, right? Then you save that. So you'll plot these as all separate PDF files, and then you just need to combine them. And if you don't have it yet, you should get this Acrobat Pro DC installed on your computer. You have already paid for it, whether you realize it or not. Your technology fee pays for you to get a license to Adobe Creative Cloud while you're a student here. If you don't know how to do that, you should go and look on the school website. There are instructions. And among other things, that gets you Adobe Acrobat Pro, which you should totally have. But it also gets you other things like Photoshop and Adobe Audition, which is a really interesting sound editing program. So you should probably do that. And that'll let you create these PDF files. OK? Oh, one other thing I was going to show you. So let's say you've done this, right, drawing title. Another thing you might want to do is do a little label for that. Right. Oops. Oh, starting point of text is here. Height. Right, do something like that. I'm going to maybe make it smaller than that. Rotate it. Oops. Oh, sorry. I'll rotate it here. Now, this does not have to be an attribute or anything. It's because this is never going to change. This is just going to go like here, so that when this changes to say something different, then I know that what that word is the title of the drawing, right?
It doesn't have to be that. It's just text.
No, it's just text that that'll never change. It's just always be there,
Okay.
right?
I don't know if you covered this. When you do the attribute and then you do the fit, how do you make sure that it's centered when you insert that attribute?
So you would just use the same kind of, well, I see what you mean now, because the insertion point might be different. This is one of those things you may just have to kind of use some guidelines and eyeball it. So, you know, I would probably do something like this. Say, all right, there is the thing.
You can actually have like a midpoint.
Right, exactly. And I might have to just cheat a little bit and find what looks like an approximate midpoint, and then track it off of the actual midpoint there.
Okay.
And that'd be how I would do it.
Because I know when I was actually doing that.
Yeah,
You know.
because the fit justify doesn't give you like a midpoint snap.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to kind of eyeball it.
Yeah. So even if you like add in just guidelines so that it.
Yeah, yeah. And then once you've done that, like you can go ahead and get rid of that line, so it's not like an extra line in there. But what you also can do is if you said fit, you can go and select this thing, like this one that is fit, and you can adjust the length of it, right? So you can say, what is the area that it will fit to, right? This or that, right? So make sure you do that so it actually fills in there, and then it'll put it in.
In your other, will you go back to your demo one
Yeah.
where you imported this?
Yeah. This one?
Yeah, so in the fit, if you don't type as many words as you have there, like if it's something really short in fit text.
It will still stretch it. Yeah.
across. So if you, you know, if you type like, if it's a really short name of a show.
Yeah, it'll go whoosh.
Okay.
So it's definitely, it's a compromise, major compromise. So just keep that in mind. You may need to, like, you know, not truncate it, like, you know. Or you may have to go in and edit the block, which you can do, but you don't usually want to do that. Like, you can go in and explode this thing and then get access to the individual fields again and edit it, but that kind of defeats the purpose. So there's a lot of this is like trying to find a happy medium that, like, gets you something that doesn't look too crappy, but also doesn't require you to do a ton of work over and over again.
For date, are we doing plot date?
I would suggest plot date, just because, you know, that's what you're using this for, is for purposes of plotting. And if you're trying to figure out which version of this was, it could be that the save date, you know, might not have anything to do with when you plotted it. So if you're telling people, hey, the one that says this date on it, that's the most current one, that should be, I think, plot date.
Does it have to be on the side, or can I put it on the bottom?
I think I'm going to say, yeah, it has to be on the right side, for purposes of us all being unified. But what you do inside of that little strip is totally up to you.
So I don't have to use the whole entire thing. Like, I can just use like a 1/4 portion.
Well, I think you're going to find that, you know, the amount of information that I'm asking you to put in there, you're going to need some space for.
And you want it to be a decent size so it's easy to
Yeah.
read.
I shouldn't have to zoom in to read your title block, right? So this should take a good chunk of your page up. I wouldn't not worry. But the way that you lay it out inside of there, I'm going to give you some creative freedom on that. Like, you can.
It is worth thinking about when you're laying it out. The bottom right corner, putting like your page number, page this out of this down there, because
Generally, that's where that goes. Most people will do that. The other thing I've seen some people do, and, you know, given how I feel about turning my neck around, I'm really surprised. I've never done this. But some people will actually, even though it's a thin one like that, they will actually rotate all this text and stack it this way.
that's what I did.
The downside to that is that, you know, something that's a really long file ends up being really tiny on here. So you may have to you can think about picking your battles on that, right? Of like, okay, some things I might have to go the other way on. But I'm going to leave you can go look at examples and other people's paperwork. You can go online and look at and get ideas from, and I'm going to give you plenty of freedom to play around with this, as long as it adheres to the minimums that I've sort of described, that it has the right information, that it behaves the way it needs to behave, looks professional, looks nice and everything. Remember, like, if you do this right, you'll never have to do this again. Like, for the next 20 years of your life, this will be the one you use, okay? So think about that. Think about, like, oh, well, someday maybe I won't be doing school shows, so I might be doing professional shows. So do I really want a field in there that is for the name of the school, right? Maybe you want that now, but later so what would be the equivalent of that? The name of the company or something like that, right? And so right now the company is the School of the Arts, but 10 years from now it would be somebody else, right? So think down the road, because if you do this right, you'll use this forever, okay? Any other questions?
How did you make your lines so big? Is that?
Oh, I just have it selected right now.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
what is this? Everything makes sense now.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
Those little, like, they look like rectangles from here. Those are just like, it tells you what the title is.
These?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just the labels, yeah.
Just when you zoom out, they obviously they don't read.
Right, yeah. But keeping in mind, this is a pretty big piece of paper.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like,
They-
if I...
They will probably read, but just
Right.
on the computer they don't.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really just-
In fact, I could plot this real quick right now, and you could see what it looks like if you want.
Can I run away?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
Thank you.